Welcome, everybody, to You of a Man Live. My name is Tim, and tonight we have a very special guest on our panel. His name is Jesse Beltran. He is the president of an organization called Mind Nexus, merging faith, spirituality, and science all together in a transformative process. So please welcome Jesse Beltran.
Well, thank you.
Jesse,
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure being on your show. Yes. So a little bit about myself. Obviously, my name is Jesse Beltran. I'm a retired Sacramento City firefighter paramedic out of Sacramento, California. I've been blessed with having many interesting occupations. One of them, currently, I'm the president of Cosmic Clarity Connections, and Mind Nexus Live is our brand, merging science and spirituality. And the whole emphasis of creating this organization was to bring to the forefront things that are considered fringe science, but we have actually documentation and proof with the topics that we talk about. But we also wanted to merge other backgrounds in psychology, psychiatry, and medicine, and spiritualists, where we can create a safe, loving, and very accepting environment where others can experience each other and really share and express the data to the general population. And we just had our first retreat this past weekend, which was very interesting. My whole purpose was to put this together so we can create an environment where we can help people heal if need be. And I had an interesting experience this weekend where I myself may have unexpectedly, serendipitously experienced some healing myself that I may have needed that I did not recognize. But I've also been the president of an organization called the International Center Against the Covert Abuse of Technologies. And that specifically started with the help of two other gentlemen in its infancy to do what is called RF scanning of individuals who were complaining about interesting phenomena, which today we would probably call anomalous health incidences or the Havana Syndrome. And that was through the help of a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall out of Texas, who was the author of two books. The first one was A New Breed Satellite Terrorism in America, and the second one was Guinea Pigs Technologies of Control, in which there was a couple of chapters that he wrote about what I was doing in my efforts to prove objectively that this phenomenon was real and happening in the United States. How it started is Dr. Hall, I met him in Texas, and he was seeing individuals who were coming to him complaining of an acute onset of some strange sounds. And when I spoke to him about this, they were also complaining about other symptoms like brain fog, short-term, long-term memory loss, vertigo, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, and electrical shocks to the extremities. And recently, the Department of Homeland Security on March 8th held a hearing about this topic, and Lieutenant Colonel Egren gave testimony about the Havana Syndrome, and they say it started in 2016 with federal employees, the U.S. diplomats, and hearing an acute onset of these strange sounds, having short-term, long-term memory fog, vertigo, nausea, vomiting, electrical shocks. And they felt it was some type of frequency that was being aimed at them. And what Colonel Egren testified to is that this was not only happening to our diplomats, but it was also happening to our CIA agents, our FBI agents, and it is happening to certain politicians in Washington, D.C. He also says that this is afflicting the best of our best. So it's basically taking them out of commission once they start to suffer this phenomena. Now, if you heard what I was describing when I was talking with Dr. Hall, they're identical. absolutely identical in their symptoms and presentation. The only difference is Colonel Egren talked about this being a directed energy weapon. So that would mean that someone is aiming some device at these individuals, and this is why they're hearing these strange sound phenomena, and they believed it to be an electromagnetic pulse weapon. Now, that's fine and dandy. These weapons do exist. In fact, there was a case down in Florida where this exact device was being used. But in general, our perception and our theory was that this is not a directed energy weapon. This is a blanketed signal that is being dispersed out the entire globe. Colonel Egren said that this phenomenon is happening on every continent with one exception, and that's Antarctica. And we know that we have been documenting this phenomena since late 2009, early 2010. And what I decided to do, because Dr. Hall said that if these individuals went to their general practitioners, they would be diagnosed with a mental disorder and be placed on drugs, which would be re-victimizing these individuals again. So we decided to put out a call to anyone suffering from these types of symptoms to please come to our meeting. And 100 people showed up at the first meeting. And they were all identical with very little deviation. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, there's more going on here. So we decided to start doing RF scans. And what an RF scan is, you get it's a device that allows us to calibrate where you have to be within 2 inches of an emission. And so we started in Davis, California, and we had over 300 people show up for that scanning. And what the data started to show that the victims who were most affected were women who were highly educated, Caucasian, in their 40s, recently widowed, single, or divorced for whatever reason. Then Caucasian males, then African-American females, then African-American males and Asians, and it dwindled down in ethnicity from there. We did this again in the Midwest with the exact same results. Changed a little bit when we got to Chicago. The Caucasian category and African-American category flipped. But that remained consistent all the way to the East Coast with one exception, and that was in Virginia. In Virginia, I was invited by a group of folks. They were all military subcontractors that were suffering from these exact same symptoms. They heard of my work, so they wanted me to do an RF scan there. And it was at that meeting that I decided to start to test for suggestibility. And the reason I did this is I have been practicing hypnosis since early 2000, became a certified master hypnotist in 2014 with my diploma in hypnotherapy. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I needed credibility, because I was noticing something. The people who were most affected by this phenomenon happened to be very highly suggestible. Now, there are a couple names I'm going to share with the audience. Aaron Alexis is a soldier who contacted me prior to doing something horrible. He contacted me with the complaint of these symptoms, and he wanted help and guidance. And so I explained to him that this is not a quick fix. This is a long journey, and that he was going to have to be patient, but there were some steps that we needed to be done first. And he didn't want to wait. And what he ended up doing is going to the Navy Yard, and he killed 16 people there. There was another case down in Florida. Myron May, who was an attorney, also contacted me prior to what he did. He also, just like Aaron, was complaining about the same phenomena, and he thought it was people in the research facility in the university there, and he went and killed 3 people. So this is why I started testing for suggestibility, and I did that there at that meeting, and I did a demonstration. And it was irrefutable. I picked the most intimidating person in the group and brought him to the middle of the room. And just by talking, as you and I are speaking now, was able to get him to do things covertly. And that was the purpose of my demonstration. And after we were done, and I asked him, because initially he denied being suggestible. And then when I asked him afterward, he said he had to accept the fact that he is. But we worked utilizing some techniques under hypnosis, using positive affirmations and helping him to use his critical thinking factors and so forth, that we were able to help him and help him recognize that, things could be different. And that's the first step. But where am I going with this? In this journey, I was invited by a foreign government agencies in Europe to come and test not only their diplomats, but their family members. And they asked me to bring individuals who I believe that this phenomenon was happening to, so that we can all be tested in what is called an anechoic chamber. And an anechoic chamber is a very robust Faraday cage that blocks out huge frequency spectrums, so that if there is an emission being transmitted from the human person, that we would be able to detect it. So we use controls, people who were not victims, tested them in the environment, got 0 frequency readings. But those who tested positive in the preliminary scans, when we put them in that environment, we were getting frequency readings in that environment that were well within the spectrum that should not have penetrated the anechoic chamber. It was only then and at that moment that we can conclude that these frequency emissions that we're detecting are for some reason coming from their person. And I'm going to share with your audience what we found. I'm going to pull my screen up here. Entire screen. And I'm assuming you can see my screen at this point.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. And implants. So this is what we were finding. This is one of my most recent clients, earliest clients. And the sweetest woman you would ever meet, and you'll wonder why the heck would anyone do this to her. So this is a collection of 3 specimens that were received. And what they pulled out of her were biosensors, chips, implants. And this was the pathology report. And it talks about these being biomaterials, having integrated circuits in them. And this is what they look like. This is a nanowire. The implants get engulfed by our bodies because they don't reject them. And they come in various shapes and sizes. And the crazy thing about this is that you can put, because they're reaching nano size, you can put several hundreds of these in the tip of a needle. Now that they are in the true nano size, you can put thousands of these in the tip of a needle. Now, for your audience, you understand measurement. Imagine in your mind's eye a millimeter. We know what the size of a millimeter is. Now, a nano is 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter. That's how small these are today. And this is what we're dealing with. So in the early days, they were much larger. They were the shape of a grain of rice. This is an actual cancerous tumor. This is a traditional RFID chip at the end of the tweezers. Now, this case is the Bob Boyce case. He was an inventor. I spoke to him on the phone. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was the inventor of a high efficiency engine. And one day he was in a Faraday cage testing for RF leakage using the same type of device that we use in our preliminary RF scans. And the wand brushed by his shoulder and it pinged 5 bars. And so that he thought that was odd when it got an x-ray, and here they found the chip inside one of the tumors that was in his person. He had it removed surgically, went to pathology, and I asked him, well, where's the chip? And he says it disappeared after it went to pathology. So nonetheless, he was just glad that his cancer had gone into remission. But sometime later, it came back very aggressively. So he went back into the Faraday cage and rescanned his person and hit positive in another location and found another RFID chip in him. This time they were smarter. They used a chain of custody and they did the surgery, pulled the chip out, obtained the serial number, and the serial number traced back to an NSA database. They sued to try to get more information, but they were told it was a national security issue. Now, over the years, this technology has becoming smaller and smaller, as I just demonstrated in that one case for my client. But here's another case of a politician down in Southern California. His name is Dave Larson. Dave Larson had many of these removed from his person. Now, this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Notice the size of these implants. These are all biosensors. They transmit and they receive information, so data. Here, this one is almost the size of the letter on a penny. This one, still very, very small, just many letters on a penny. But this is where we're at today. This nanotechnology that we're pulling out of people is where our government agencies have been planning for quite some time. There is a report I'm going to share with you, and it's called New World Vistas.
Do they suffer from side effects after you take those implants?
If you take the implants out, the symptoms will go away. But if you don't, you're going to suffer the same symptoms that those of the Havana Syndrome sufferers are experiencing. I had a shorter version of this, and I apologize, but I'm going to take you to page 89 of this 222 declassified report.
Hey, before you go any farther, down below in the center of the screen, it says stop sharing. Right to the right of it, it says hide. Yeah, just hide.
Okay. There
you go.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
Better? Okay, good. So this is the New World Vistas reports, a declassified document by the United States Air Force, and they had all their greatest minds. This was released in November of 1994, and it says biological processes. Now, they were creating this document so that the United States Air Force can stay a superpower 50 years into the future. And I'm going to read the highlighted areas. And it says, appears likely there are a number of physical agents that might actively but largely benignly interact or interfere with biological process in an adversary. Prior to the mid-21st century, there will be a virtual explosion of the knowledge in the field of neuroscience. We will have achieved a clear understanding of how the human brain works, how it really controls the various functions of the body, and how it can be manipulated both positively and negatively. One can envision the development of electromagnetic energy sources, the output of which can be pulse, shaped, and focused that can couple with the human body in a fashion that will allow one to prevent voluntary muscular movements, control emotions, and thus actions, produce sleep, transmit suggestions, interfere with both short-term and long-term memory loss. Remember what the diplomats are complaining about. Produce an experience set and delete an experience set. This will open the door for the development of some novel capabilities that can be used in armed conflict, in terrorist hostage situations, and in training. New weapons that offer the opportunity of control of an adversary without resorting to lethal solution or collateral casualties can be developed around this concept. This would offer significant improvements in the capabilities of our special operation forces. Initial experimentation that should be focused on the interaction of electromagnetic energy and the neuromuscular junctions in voluntary muscle control. It would also appear possible to create, here's where it gets interesting, high-fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion and psychological direction. When a high-power microwave pulse in the gigahertz range strikes the human body, a very small temperature perturbation occurs. This is associated with a sudden expansion of slightly heated tissues. This expansion is fast enough to produce an acoustic wave. If a pulse stream is used, it should be possible to create an internal acoustic field in the 5 to 15 kilohertz range, which is audible. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. In comparison to the discussion in the paragraphs above, the concept of imprinting an experience set is highly speculative, but nonetheless highly exciting. Modern electromagnetic scattering theory raises the prospect of the ultra-short pulse scattering through the human brain that can result in reflected signals that can be used to construct a reliable estimated degree of central nervous system arousal. The concept behind the remote EEG is to scatter off action potentials or ensembles of action potentials in major central nervous system tracts. Assuming we will understand how our skills are imprinted and recalled, it might be possible to take this concept one step further and duplicate the experience set in another individual. That's pretty crazy enough, but remember, this was 35 years ago, and they worked on it. They worked on it before that. So this has been many years in the making. Now I'm going to share one more document, and then we can open up the discussion, and I can talk about what our findings have been. Where is my report? This was an intercepted document. From a lawsuit that was done in 2019 of this year. And this was the Dawn DeVore case. She was a nurse for the Department of Corrections in California. She became a whistleblower and she sued, but unfortunately she settled out of court. We wish she would have gone all the way through, but in her exhibits that she submitted for evidence, here's one of the documents. It says IntelliConnection, a security division of IBM, confidential, limited distribution, only level 9 communication. So this was only supposed to go to the person in charge of the prison and only top level management. And it talks about 2020 neurochip implant. The control of crime will be a paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand for them becomes popular. Our Research and Development Division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections to run limited trials of the 2020 neurochip implant. We have established representatives of our interests in both management and institutional levels within these departments. So they're getting their own personnel hired. Federal regulations do not yet permit testing of implants on prisoners, but we have entered into contractual agreements with privatized healthcare professionals and specified correctional personnel to do limited testing of our product. We have also had major success in privately owned sanitariums with implant technology. We need, however, to expand our testing to research how effective the 2020 chip implant performs in those identified as the most aggressive in our society. Limited testing has produced a number of results. In California, several prisoners were identified as a member of a security threat group. So they're doing this because they're protecting us, right? They were brought to the health services at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed by our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratories. The implants procedures take 60 to 90 minutes depending on the experience of the technician. We are working on a device that will reduce the time by as much as 60%. The results of the implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. Implants served as a surveillance monitoring device. And later you'll hear that there is no privacy once this is in you. Everything that you do and see is transmitted. Implants disabled 2 subjects during an assault on correctional staff. A universal side effect in all 8 subjects revealed that when the implants was set and received a signal at 116 megahertz, all subjects became lethargic and slept on an average of 18 to 22 hours per day. All subjects refused recreation. Obviously, if you're lethargic, you're not going to do that. 7 of the 8 subjects did not exercise in the cell at all. Each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period, and the findings are conclusive that 8 out of the 8 test subjects exhibited no aggression even when they were provoked. Each subject experienced only minor bleeding through the nose and ears 48 hours after the implant due to initial adjustment. Each subject had no knowledge of the implant for the test period, and each implant was retrieved under the guise of medical treatment. It should be noted that the test period was for less than 2 months. However, during the period, substantial data was gathered by our research and development team, which suggests that the implant exceeded expected results. One of the major concerns of the security and R&D team was that the test subject would discover the chemical imbalance during the initial adjustment period, and the test would have to be scrubbed. However, due to the advanced technological developments in sedatives administered, the 48-hour adjustment period can be attributed to prescription medication given to the test subject after the implant. So instead of our bodies trying to fight this foreign object, they're going to blame it on the drugs. I'm going to go down to the last page because here's what they've been doing. Essentially, implants make the unsuspecting prisoners a walking, talking recorder of every event he comes into contact with. There are only 5 intelligence officers and the Commissioner of Corrections who actually know the full scope of the implant testing. In Massachusetts, the Department of Corrections has already entered into high-level discussions about releasing certain offenders to the community with the 2020 neurochip implant. Our people are not altogether against the idea. However, attorneys for IntelliConnection have advised against implant technology outside strict control settings. Under the present governmental structure, our liability would be enormous. While we have a strong lobby in Congress and various state legislatures favoring our product, we must proceed with the utmost caution on uncontrolled use of the 2020 neurochip implant. If the chip were to be discovered and not authorized by law and the procedure traced to us, we could not endure for long the resulting publicity and liability payments. Massachusetts officials have developed an intelligence branch in the Fugitive Task Force, would do limited test runs under tight controls. Corrections officials have dubbed these potential subjects insurance groups. From the 2020 implant ensures compliance with the law and allow officials to detect misconduct or violations. The bottom line is they're doing this, and Vacaville Prison, in this document, they talk about most of the testing is happening. So you look at who's the most vulnerable in our society.
Elderly,
people with
disabled.
Yeah, the disabled, the elderly, those who have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, those who use substance abuse. So these are all the victims that they're going after because no one's going to give them any credibility. So what we were finding when we were doing our early studies is you superimpose all those victims who complain of Havana Syndrome or HHIs, you superimpose their RF scans over each other, they all line up. You take the military, you superimpose them over each other, they all line up. I always wondered why people who were incarcerated were coming up positive. They were coming up slightly different than the others, but they all lined up. This document proves that they have been doing this for quite some time. And I've had meetings with officials high up in the Department of Corrections. And I asked them, I said, hey, Ronnie Reagan, when he was governor, wanted to implant all these prisoners. I hear there's some white papers going on that they're actually doing this in private prisons. And they confided in me and said, yes, that this was happening, but if they were ever told to testify that I had this conversation with them, they would deny it. So this is where we're at. Now, the reason I became a hypnotherapist is because I know what you can do as long as you have sound and then the human mind can interpret that sound as language and acts on that language. There's a Canadian psychiatrist by the name of Ewan Cameron who in early days was given funding by the United States government in order to see if he could erase the human brain and imprint it with false memories. And he would use techniques like electric shock therapy. He would use drugs to make them have long-term sleep for weeks at a time. And then he would put this helmet over them with a tape recorder in it. And on the tape recorder, he would have themes that repeat and loop over and over and over again. So what is the main complaint of Havana Syndrome victims today? Is this acute onset of this unusual sound. Some of them talk about hearing voices. Now imagine being exposed to this 365 days a year, 24/7. This is basically psychic driving on steroids. And that is where we are today. So wow. the question derives, those, you hear about this alien abduction phenomena. Is this false memories? Is this imprinting? Is this real? You hear the MyLab, where there's individuals who say they've been abducted by the military and implanted. Again, is this what they're experiencing? Then you're dealing with what my specialty is in, is the human aspect of this, because all of these implants all trace back to some type of biomedical corporation. Now, you think back during the concentration camps, who came up with the punch card system? You know what company did? It's IBM.
Wow.
Here we are dealing with IBM once again. And, you know, the other issue, is this truly the mark of the beast?
Okay, I'm going to refer to Nos. Nos, what do you think of all this?
Can't hear her.
You're muted.
She's muted.
Sorry. So one of the things I'm wondering about is, with people that have shown the presence of these frequencies from the implants and such, have you compared dopamine levels?
No.
Okay. I would suggest you do so when you have the opportunity. The type of effects that you're describing with relation to this can happen if the dopamine response in the body becomes reduced. And essentially what happens, it's like existing in a state of sensory deprivation. And individuals that are subjected to that particular state will seek out hyperstimulation, which means you will have people who have more addictive behaviors, more problems with drugs, things along those lines. They'll switch focus very frequency. Whatever it is that used to bring them joy does not. And they keep trying other things, trying to find a sense of joy, because their dopamine levels don't respond properly. And when you have sensory deprivation, think about putting a person in a sensory deprivation tank. When your body registers that you're not getting stimulation from the environment around you, it starts producing stimulation on its own.
Well, the stimulation, I guess I'm trying to understand the correlation between implants and dopamine, the significance there, because we're always looking for, right now, what we do an RF scan. If it's older technology, depending on when the symptoms started, we'll ask them to get a panoramic X-ray or your traditional MRI scans. Then we'll get what is called a nonlinear junction scan. And after the nonlinear junction scan, ultimately we want you in an anechoic chamber, because what we're looking for is to prove that this frequency emission is coming from the human body. Right. So that's why my question is, how, what would be the significance with the implants and the dopamine?
Well, this relates to the symptoms you've described, like around the Havana Syndrome situation. It's like if a person is sleepwalking and doesn't have real control over their motor skills. When you're in a haze, when you're on the edge of sleep, right? When your body is shutting off your sensitivity to processes, where you stop paying attention to the noises around you, and you stop feeling your clothes and feeling the blankets, and your sensitivity is shutting down, what your body is doing is creating a sensory deprivation. And when
these victims are not sensory deprived. They're right. Overstimulated.
Right.
They're overstimulated because of the implants.
Right. Well, that's what I was getting at, is that's how the body normally reacts to actual sensory deprivation occurring. But with the senses in your body creates the stimulation in the brain. The stimulation goes into the system, controlling the neurotransmitters, and determining how you feel about that. And by hyper-stimulating the individuals with this, then the body no longer has the normal response to the environmental stimuli around them. So
Okay.
it's like getting burnt out on a drug by doing too much of it. So with that sort of circumstance, when you get high dopamine levels in the brain from hyperstimulation, then there's no pleasure that occurs from it anymore, no matter what you do, no matter what you try to do with it. And the body keeps trying to up its response because it's not getting the feedback it's looking for.
Mm. Okay, so you're saying that if we tested these individuals who were implanted, we should expect to see in a blood draw higher levels of dopamine than normal?
I would say higher levels of dopamine in relation to their reported mental state. Because like if you have somebody that they are flat affect, but the dopamine levels you see are for someone at a birthday party, you got a problem. So it's that mismatch. The data will build pretty easily for that, I think.
Okay, we have a question for you from the chat room. Do these implants use the 7.5 volts of our natural body electricity?
They are. We have enough voltage to keep these things on forever. Our natural biofields will completely power these things. They've mastered that. Yeah. Now, the danger we're facing today is the nanotechnology. The nanotech is now self-replicating and self-assembling. And remember, you can put thousands, literally thousands of these in the tip of a needle. And I recently did an interview. It's called the Celestial Report, and probably one of the 10 brightest minds I've met in my lifetime. And when I disclosed all this information to her, she shared something with me that was completely profound. And I have to give it some credence only because my experience with the Presidential Bioethics Commission. She had said back in the early 2000s that in the rule of law, they redefined what a human was. And she says the reason they did this is because they were already planning this development of the nanotechnology. Now, in the research, and I have the articles, the research papers from the universities. I subscribe to JSTOR, so I'm always trying to stay on top of where we're going with this stuff. Now, in the research, they say that you can change a species within 6 generations with this nanotechnology. There's another physician by the name of Dr. Rima LeBeau. She was married to General Stubblebine. And I met with her this weekend, and she says, and we've had prior conversations, that you can change a species in 1 generation. Now, why am I mentioning this? When I did that interview with in the Celestial Report, the reason they're doing this is because now you're going to have superpower governments and or corporations who will have the ability to patent you because you are no longer considered human by definition. And this is why we are going very strong and aggressively to do all these interviews so that we can educate the general population. Anyone who has a large forum, this is why we're speaking to you and sharing this information to you, because really what's at hand here is we're in a war to preserve our species. Now, the Politico did an interview with President Putin. And President Putin in this article said the first superpower to master psychotronic weapons will be the superpower to rule this planet. And I truly believe that back in 2010 up into 2014-15, we were in the experimental phase here in the United States. But I think now what we're in an arms race, and that's what all the data is indicating.
Okay. Holly.
Well, I wanted to ask, why do you think this started in Cuba? And why does not happen in Alaska?
Well, it actually, what I'm saying, it did not start in Cuba. It only got attention from the United States federal government because initially it was rejected. When the diplomats started talking about this, they automatically said, oh, this is some type of mental health phenomena. This is psychosis, mass hysteria. They even blamed it on crickets at one time. They didn't take it seriously until the Canadian diplomats started having the exact same symptoms. When the Canadian diplomats had the exact same phenomena going on, their government immediately helped them and gave them support. Then the United States jumped on board and started supporting our diplomats, our FBI agents, and our CIA agents. Okay. Now, Colonel Egren testified it's happening on every planet with the exception of Antarctica. So even Alaska has this phenomena going on. Now, there's a gentleman out there who happened to be, his name always skips me, but he was a firefighter for Raytheon, and he claims to work there in Alaska. And he speaks about there being some type of array system that they embed in the snow. And this array system produces things called neutrinos and quasars. And these things move faster than the speed of light. He claims that by turning this on, we accidentally caused the earthquakes in New Zealand. He says that was a friendly fire event. He also says that this is the source of this phenomena called V2K, the voice of God weapon, this sound spectrum that people are experiencing. Now, I am kind of curious now because Colonel Egren did testify there in Congress that it's happening on every continent except Antarctica. So I'm quite curious about that, and we're delving into that more to see if we can obtain more legitimate data out of that. But here's the bottom line. The government is saying this is a directed energy weapon. What our organization is saying is think about this with the common sense approach. The logistics in aiming these directed energy weapons at so many people at the same time is not cost effective. It would be a logistical nightmare. But if you blast it out to the entire globe, then you have to conclude and ask, then what is special about these individuals who are hearing the signal? And what we're finding is what makes them special is they have this biotech in them.
So the biotech is actually aiding in the reception of this frequency.
Correct.
Okay, Nancy.
Wow.
Sounds like the extraterrestrials are going to be saving us again and again.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking all about all this. Now, okay, I'm a contactee with interdimensional beings, so I find this quite fascinating. You know, they get the blame for a lot of things, a lot of the conspiracy theories. Well, I've always known that a lot of it is government. So I guess what I want to ask you is, I hear exactly what you're saying about it's bad, the use of it being negative. You know, there's nothing good about it at this point. What I'm going to ask you next is, could this be turned around and used as something in a positive fashion if the right people were in charge, or is it strictly just something we should not be playing with?
Well, because humans time and time again have proven they cannot be responsible with great power, I'm of the position that this should absolutely be 100% banned. But I think we're too late for that. Can it be used for positive aspects? Yes. Can you make a superhuman? Yes. Think about it, where you no longer have to go to universities or schools. You want to be a a scientist, a neurosurgeon, whatever. You just download the information and you have the skill set. If you know, I know that there has been work with this technology with being telepathic, intuitiveness, having superhuman strength, superhuman endurance. In that document that I shared with you, they talk about making super soldiers. They talk about flying craft just by thought. At this, this basically the speed of light, making decisions when to fire a missile or not to fire a missile. But in that context, you could interpret it as negative. And let's take it a step further. They're integrating AI with this technology, and there's a video that we've produced. It's called Havana Syndrome, and you can see it on our website. But then Senator Joe Biden was confirming Roberts, and in that confirmation hearing, he says to Roberts, mark my words, during my lifetime, you will have to decide whether it's constitutional or not to put a small biometric tag in a human. Okay. And there, in the Presidential Bioethics Commission hearings, Francis Collins, he speaks out loud and he talks about MRI scans, and he goes, UBOs. He goes, consequently, we're finding these unusual objects in MRI scans. They call them UBOs, unidentified bright objects. Do you want one in your brain? Well, you might. And he talks about, how they assess an individual to say, well, you're going to get the doctor chip. You're going to get the sanitation worker chip. You're going to get the police officer chip. This is where they're going. And then think about integrating with AI. Think about what this did to those prisoners. It incapacitated them. What happens if we're in a society where AI is now the pseudo god, the pseudo, the technology that's in control? You're now and I was actually invited to a case where a gentleman was put in prison for a thought crime. Now this is taking it to a whole new level because it already knows what you're thinking by reading your EEG. Now, just because you think something doesn't mean you're going to do it. But we're going to get to a point, if we allow this to continue, just your thoughts will get you thrown in prison. And then now, is there such thing as a free society? They say we have free will. That's what makes us special. But do we really have free will in that type of environment? So these are all the very difficult conversations we have to have, and we have to have it quickly. People don't know, as recently as the 24th of September, the WHO tried to push a treaty in which where they can have mass control over all of us on the globe. It didn't pass. So in secret, the UN passed a pact. And in that pact, they talk about, and the United States is part of that pact. They talked about that biometric tag that Biden was talking about. And they say that every person on this planet will have it. And the United States is no longer going to be in control. It's going to be the UN. Now, I have a case recently where, for the first time in 20 years, it was a gentleman we scanned, and he was the Special Forces, United States Special Forces. He had an unusual frequency which we hadn't detected before. And so we started to delve in and investigate what this frequency was, because I figured, the United States must own it. He's one of our soldiers. And when we dug in deep, no one in the United States had the leasing for this frequency spectrum. So I decided, out of a hunch and intuition, to check Europe. And when we typed in that frequency, the agency that had the leasing control over that frequency was NATO. So this is very important, because why the hell would NATO own the frequency of a U.S. Special Forces soldier? It makes no sense whatsoever, unless they are pushing this agenda forward.
Yeah,
But to use him as an asset.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go into a little bit about what happened to you this weekend in your personal experiences and how you went from being a hardcore skeptic about ufology into possibly a 90 percentile believer?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we initially had a conference. We didn't sell enough tickets, so we had to cancel that event. And we said, okay, well, how do we keep Mind Nexus moving forward? So what we decided to do was hold a retreat and amongst the locals there, and individuals who were already purchased their plane tickets that they couldn't refund. There were speakers. We said, well, you might as well come and maybe you can do a little presentation at our retreat. So I went to our retreat because I'm there to help people heal or ask questions along with our team. And up until this weekend, I was a hardcore skeptic. I was, show me the data, show me the evidence, show me the science behind everything. That's what's made us successful. And this has been a 15-year fight. And we're finally getting cases into the court systems that have been rejected in the past, or we're finally there. But in this group, you have people who strongly believe in ufology, and they believe in the alien contact phenomenon. And I wasn't a believer at all, zero. And that's what I could say. Well, on the first night in the evening, I was speaking to my business partner out at the end of the driveway of this mansion that we were at. And we were just chatting, and all of a sudden, this white orb flies in front of our face, and we're only 2 feet from each other. And I see it go by, and I go, "Did you see that?" And he goes, "I didn't see it, but I felt it." And he goes, "What was that?" I go, "I don't know." I said, "It was some type of white light, an orb that flew by." And so he said, "Okay." So I'm just processing. I say, "Okay, that's just one of those aberrant phenomena in life." And then later on that evening, the group wanted to do what is called the CE5 meditation, something that I'm completely foreign to, know nothing about. And I'm like, okay, I'll be part of the team. I don't want to be a party pooper. But again, because I'm so analytical, I'm like, I'm not sure what the purpose is. But I'm also a hypnotist, but I know what trance is. So I figured, well, they're going to do a meditation. Well, at least that would be healthy to relax people and get everyone's vibration up to a certain level. And so we're doing the meditation at night, and I have my eyes open because I'm just, again, I want to see what's going on. I want to assess the environment and get the data. And then you hear a few experiencers in the group go, "Did you just see that?" And what they were referring to was this orb that was in the sky that burst and became a ring of light and then disappeared. And it illuminated, it was so bright, it illuminated the ground. And I'm like, wow, what the heck was that? And so I'm assessing. I just saw an orb earlier in the evening. Now we have this meditation and there's this light thing. I mean, like, well, could there be something to this, raising your frequency and being able to communicate with something of unknown origin? I don't know. And so again, being a skeptic, I'm just saying, okay, there has to be some explanation for this. Now, I only sleep very few hours. I don't sleep very long. And so the following morning, I got up and made a cup of coffee. It was around 4:45 a.m. And we were in Tucson, Arizona. So it's very hot, but in that time of the day, it's beautiful. It's nice and cool. And so I was out by the gazebo, just sitting in a gravity chair, just enjoying my coffee, looking up in the sky, and I see what appears to be a satellite. And it's a white round light, just going across the sky, moving slow like you would expect a satellite, except at one moment it takes a right angle, goes like this, and then it shoots up at another right angle and disappears. And I go, okay, well, that's weird. Maybe that's what they call a UAP, And now I'm having all these experiences, and then 35 minutes later, a fleet of 8 of them come flying by and then dart off and disappear. So that's why I say I can't deny that experience. And one of my business partners is always say, see, I told you so. And, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I have to say, Desiree, you were right. I'm 90% a believer and 10% skeptic because, is it us or is it something else? Or is it a combination of the two? That's the questions that I have.
The one thing I want to say is, one thing we reiterate quite often here on the channel is to tell people to look up. Stop looking at your phone and look up at the sky, because it's amazing what's flying by. You learn what the difference is between satellites and SpaceX, and you learn what the difference is between a shooting star and something that's moving erratically and showing off different lights. You learn, and you realize there's a lot of stuff flying around out there. We have no clue what it is, and it can change your world paradigm. And I understand where you're coming from, Jesse. I have to say this: when you saw the 8 objects fly by, what was your initial impression? Were they lights? Were they round? Did they have shape?
They were all round. They were exactly like the first object that I thought was a satellite. But when you're that far up in the sky, they look like they're this big. But they were in. There was I would say a light that was at the head of the group and a light at the end of the group, and they were evenly dispersed within between, and they just shot across the sky. And, that was my observation of them, but it definitely wasn't.
I was going to say, what state were you in and what time of day was it?
It was Tucson, Arizona, and when I saw the fleet, it was around 5:30 in the morning.
5:30 in the morning. That's a good time to look.
Was there any change in the environment?
No, none whatsoever. Like I said, I was just enjoying my coffee on a beautiful morning and enjoying the cooler temperature. And
what was that breaking point for you? Like, you are a person that comes from a science background, and so you see these suddenly. What was that second that you said, like, okay, no, that's not the science I know. This was different. This is a breaking something.
Had I not seen that initial object that I believe was a satellite move at right angles at super high speeds,
the angles,
that was the breaking point for me. That I said, okay, I'm not aware of any commercial technology that we currently have that can do those kinds of things, and the type of inertia that would require a humanistic aspect to experience that it would kill you. So it was at that point that I had. No, it was at that point that I had to say, okay, I'm not 100% yet, but I'm 90% there. Yeah.
Well,
you do realize that there's a theory going around that some of these vehicles are unmanned, or the possibility exists that they're creating a gravitational field within the vehicle. So if there was a human being inside of it, he or she would not be affected by the inertia at the extreme right angles that they turn.
Correct. And I do know that there are many patents out there regarding this technology.
Yes.
That have been registered. So, and this is why I say I'm saving that 10%, because I know that those patents exist. Are these unmanned vehicles? And that is the question that I have.
I've actually seen those patents as well, and they're for different types of technology. a lot of people used to say that transphasic technology doesn't exist within our arsenal, but it does. According to patents, we have transphasic vehicles that can travel underwater at high speeds, enter the air and fly and go into space. So that's transphasic technology, and we've had that for a while.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, are they actually being used? I can't verify that. I don't have the chain of data to verify. Everybody talks about the TR3B and the TR6. There's a lot of information about them if you really dig, and I do have a lot of information on them, but they're not transphasic. Well, they are in a way because they can travel from the air and into space. So I suppose that's transphasic. But I was thinking
that's transmedium.
Transmedium. I was thinking about going into water without making a splash. That's transphasic, right, Nos?
It depends,
Yes.
because what we're looking at is that if they're actually doing transphasic, then the material alignment will shift it out. It's shifting into an extra dimensional space by degrees as you're doing a transphasic shift.
I see.
But that's not the only way to move at full speed through water, though, because if you have a relativity field on the outside of the ship that results in zero inertia, then no matter what you're pressing on it, it can't press back. So you can.
Right, that makes sense. Well, there's a theory about all this happening.
But those, if they're using that for their water transport, then you'll see disturbance in the water, like bubbles, things along those lines, from the cavitation that happens with the rapid change in pressure in the water. But if they're doing transphasic, you won't have bubbles.
Okay, Casey Albright from the chat room brought up something that I was kind of mentioning to the panelists before our guest Jesse arrived. Smart dust has existed for quite some time. I know there are nanotech chips. At least I've seen pictures of them. They're really, 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 really tiny. And they can be dispersed through jet streams, and you can breathe them in. And everybody on the planet most likely already has smart dust within them and can be tracked. What do you think about Jesse?
Well, basically, when you say smart dust, you're talking about nanotech. And
Yes.
like I said, you can put 1 billion of these devices on a 1 by 1 inch wafer. So to disperse them in the air, is it possible? Absolutely. There are many modalities that you can, disperse this technology. Not only in the air, you can ingest them, inject them, all of these issues. And I saw a report today that someone had sent to me in an email of a study where they were looking at the lidocaine derivative that you get when you're at a dental office, and they exposed it to electromagnetic frequency. Initially, on the initial slides, it would just look like a bunch of tiny dots under spectroscopy. And when they sent the frequency to them, they would align in little squares like a chip. It was really interesting to watch. If people are getting injected with this stuff, it's a very reasonable and feasible way of doing it. Yeah.
On a massive scale, too.
Yeah.
Nos.
I'm wondering, with Mind Nexus, what direction you want to go from here? Like, what's an optimal outcome direction for the organization?
Yeah, well, right now it's public awareness, because initially, when someone is affected with AHIs or the Havana Syndrome, what happens is you experience what is called fight or flight. Okay. And depending on what your personality makeup is, you're going to react in one of the two ways. Myron May was a fighter. Their makeup was that. Aaron Alexis, the same thing. So they acted out. So that's why we've made it our priority for those who test highly suggestible, who believe that they're experiencing this, that they reach out to us. You can actually go to our website and take a suggestibility test. And if you test highly suggestible, we'll reach out to you. But everyone needs assistance and help. Right now, there are currently 0 resources that are available for those in the general population. And this is why we're trying to awaken the masses. Now, the other thing that we need to do is we all need to get on the phones, and we need to be talking to our congressional members, and we need to say we want the hell out of the UN, particularly because of what was passed on the 24th. That pact we should have nothing to do with, because if we give up our autonomy to a foreign agency, the United States has done. Also, in that...
we signed away our sovereignty.
Correct. That's exactly what they did. And in that New World Vistas document that I shared earlier, it talks about inducing World War III. And in it, it says what post-World War III would look like for the United States. We're not the winners in their agenda. Mm-hmm. They separate out the United States into 3 smaller countries. And I assure you, with this nanotechnology, it is going to be the demise of the human species. Humans are not capable of being responsible with this kind of power right now. We just aren't.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's take last questions from Polly and Nancy. Polly?
Well, I usually don't like to go through personal stories, but in this case, I need to say that when I came to Israel, I had kind of a recruiting letter from our intelligence, okay? But it doesn't matter what happened with it. I suffer from all the symptoms, vertigo, everything you've described. In 2006, I had 2 brain surgeries because they discovered 2 cysts in my brain. And in one of these operations, they tried to take that cyst from the nose. It was in my pituitary gland. Okay. And when they tried to take that cyst from the pituitary gland, it exploded. It actually exploded. And the doctors didn't understand what happened. So all my fluid from the brain was just going out through the nose. The doctors then explained that they found kind of a little cube inside the cyst. But I don't have the evidence. They throw it, So how do I know if I was targeted here, or if
it's going to be hard to tell just right now in this brief conversation. When we do an interview, we do a really extensive workup where we'll get a real strong history, your affiliations, family members, occupations that you've done throughout life. We want to narrow down exactly when you believe you may have started to have these experiences or symptoms, and then we'll work from there. But typically, like I said, we'll do a preliminary RF scan today. Not so much for the radiographic reports, although it is helpful to have, because this technology is so small and medicine has not taught anything about this phenomenon. And that's on purpose. And really what you need to do ultimately is get what's called a nonlinear junction scan, because there's two types of biosensors. There's the active, which are on 24/7, 365 days a year. And then there's passive. Passive means it's not on. You have to send a frequency to it to engage it. So what the nonlinear junction scan will do is we'll scan you, we'll send it, it'll detect for ferrous materials. And if it detects it, it'll send an echo. The echo will go back and it'll send a secondary echo to turn it on. And then a third one to get the frequency. So that's why we say ultimately the nonlinear junction scan is what you want to have done.
Okay.
And then in an anechoic chamber. Now, there is a phenomenon that a lot of the victims complain about. They hear a 10 to 11.03 kilohertz high-pitched whine.
I have
frequency.
that high speech all the time. It's unbearable.
Okay. So make sure you get my contact information afterward, because recently we've developed a technique. So that's let's say theoretically you have this tech in you. That 10 kilohertz frequency that's being transmitted, that's the debilitating part for most people.
Yes.
We're used to hearing people talk or use language, so that doesn't bother us as much. But that frequency is very debilitating, and if you go to the doctor, they're going to say you have tinnitus or Meniere's disease. The problem is that it doesn't have this effect where it feels like someone has control of the volume and is messing with you sometimes and turning it up and down.
Yes.
Now, we've developed a technique that will actually jam that frequency. Hopefully, if you have it bilaterally on both sides, they're in the same frequency. If not, then we have to get a little bit more advanced and more technical and create a two-channel frequency emission that'll block each one out. But there is a way to do that, and it's been successful 100% of the time. But this is for implanted people. This is not for if you have a disease process going on. Now, I had recently the woman that we had those implants removed from. She's had that high-pitched whine for 20 some odd years. It was gone within seconds as soon as we turned on the device. Yeah.
Wow.
But it allows your brain to rest again. It allows you to feel somewhat normal again, and that's the great thing about it.
That's life-changing, actually.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was very emotional for her. Yeah,
it is. It should be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nancy.
Okay, I have a question. So, do you think that what people used to think were extraterrestrial implants were literally government implants and they just got the blame for that? Because I am a contactee. I do not have implants. They locate me wherever I am through my frequency. There is no device in my body. So
have you been scanned?
Yeah.
What type of scan?
Well, I worked for the military, and also I've had all kinds of MRI, CT, full body.
Yeah, but I'm talking about more specific medical. The general medicine today is not going to know anything about this. What I'm more curious about is RF scans or nonlinear junction scans. Have you ever had that done?
No, but I have a radiology permit, but I've never used that type of X-rays.
This is outside of radiology. I used to work in radiology, so this is completely outside of medicine. You're going to have, this is more on technology specialists. You're going to, in order to say that you don't have an implant, you're going to have one of those scans done.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Because I am a contactee. But my question is, some of these people, all right, let's just ask you this. Have you come across extraterrestrial implants? Like when you were checking out these people through the hypnotic regression or through checking out their implants? Or did any of them turn out to be extraterrestrial that were totally unknown?
No, all implants that we are familiar with to this day have all been of human intervention. They all trace back to some type of biomedical company or corporation. IBM's working on it. BlackRock, of all places, has the most sophisticated brain implant right now that can connect to 10,000 neurons at one time. And I find that interesting because the kid that shot at President Trump was in a BlackRock commercial.
Wow.
Yeah, and it specifically says in their literature that you have to inject them with the nanotechnology in order to get this implant to work. But Raytheon, I mean, there are a lot of corporations out there working on this stuff.
That's awesome. Well, where would an individual, go to get those top scans, or do you have to contact you to find out like locations, or is that available?
If we're in the area, we're more than happy to invite you down to participate and get one of these scans. What Mind Nexus is going to be doing now is we're going to start doing these retreats, and like this last weekend, I did many scans. And what's intriguing about that is we're doing scanning on people who aren't typically people complaining about AHIs or Havana Syndrome. These are just people that just generally want to know. What was interesting, and this is why when you mentioned the nano dust, is that individuals were coming up positive for an RF emission in their lungs, specific areas in their lungs. And I hadn't seen that before. So this is something new. And a new data set that we're going to keep an eye on.
We have a question from the chat room from Sightings on 18 Wheels. What kind of RF scanner is used?
In the field, we use what is called a JM20 Pro frequency scanner, general frequency scanner. And then we use an ASECO frequency reader if we get a positive reading so that we can get the frequency emission.
Thank you. My friend 18 Wheels, he is into the technical data so that he can go out and get the equipment and scan himself if he needs to do so.
Yeah, now the nonlinear junction scanner equipment, that's a little pricey. You're going to be starting at around $35,000 on up to $100,000 for that piece of equipment. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Nos, you got anything, last comments? You're muted.
Sorry, I always mute it when I type because I have a loud mechanical keyboard. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for including us in the rounds as you're spreading your message, because this is obviously very important.
Yes,
and it's nice that this is what we're here for, is to let the public see the things they're not seeing through all the other channels. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having this platform, because dissemination of truthful information is very important. And we need to find the answer. The reason, and like I said, when I say there's some big things happening behind closed doors, when it comes out, it's going to be amazing. But it's important that we figure out: is this the alien phenomena real? Is this induced? Is the MyLab phenomena real, or is it what we're talking about, or is the Havana Syndrome phenomena or are they all integrated into one? Once you have the ability to imprint false memories, once you have the ability to hypnotize people remotely and get them to do things that they wouldn't normally do, then it's quite conceivable that these all could be intersecting, and that we may be dealing with a similar thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to let everybody know some of the places where he can be found. He has a website called Mind Nexus. This is the only screenshot I could get of it. So Mind Nexus, check it out.
MindNexusLive.com.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have his Facebook page. And we need to get his followers up. So please go over there and follow him.
Mhm.
And then he's also on YouTube. This is his YouTube channel. Please subscribe to his YouTube channel and keep updated on the information that he's providing. Also, he's on Instagram as well. So if you go to Instagram, you can check him out there. He's also on Twitter, so you can check him out there as well. We want to thank Jesse for coming tonight to UFO Man.
Thank you so
Live.
much.
I
You're
learned
welcome.
a lot, actually.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't talk much, because you were so informative. We would
Sorry,
like
I talk a lot sometimes.
No, that's
No,
fine.
this was so amazing. And thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing your own experience with the orbs. And
Yeah,
let
thank
us
you.
know how do you go with your process, you know.
Yeah,
Thank
Will
you
do.
so much.
Thank you.
We would like to keep in touch with you, and
Please do.
we'd like to also invite you back at a later date to go deeper
Perfect.
into this subject and spend a little more time on maybe a little bit more with mind control and consciousness and frequency. Okay?
Sounds good. Great.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, we thank you very much, Jesse. You have my email, I think. So you can write me there anytime you want. In my email, I left with Mike, your mediary, I left all my personal information. So you should have it.
Perfect.
You have my phone
Sounds
number
great.
and all that. So I will get the contact information out to Polly. Otherwise, if you would stay a couple seconds after the show, you can give it to her in the private chat.
Sure, that's
Okay.
fine.
Okay. All right. I want to
Thank
thank
you.
everybody who watched online, everybody
Thank
who
you,
participated in the chat room. I have to say, you've been very engaging, and we had a lot of new people show up, actually.
Great.
We are going to bring this gentleman back because he has a very important message, and it's life-changing. So we'd like to see you again next week. Not scheduled yet, but we'll figure it out. But we got coming up on the 23rd, we have a guest coming up, and we have another one on the 30th. So
Yes.
we're working
Stay
on the
tuned.
other two. So stay tuned. Yes. Anyways, good night, everybody, and we'll
Bye-bye.
see you next time.
Next time.